Buongiorno e benvenuti. Welcome to Art Yoga Pills with me, your host, Dinny. In this space, we will connect and share together about creativity, inner child, and self-awareness. Siete pronti? Enjoy! Ciao a tutti, Kia ora, and welcome to a new episode of Art Yoga Pills. Today I'm not alone. I have a very special guest. I have Darryl Bishop. How are you, Darryl?
I'm good, Diddy. How are you?
I'm really good, actually. I was looking forward for this moment of sharing a one-on-one conversation with you again. We had a couple of encounters throughout this and the past year, and this is a way of sharing our conversation with a bigger audience. But to begin this connection, I would like to ask you if you wouldn't mind to share about yourself, and in this case, you can go either professionally or personally, so that also our audience knows who this special guest is today.
I suppose you're supposed to go professionally, then finish personally, aren't you? That's the way. That's the Tiamari way to do it. I'm Darryl Bishop. I am the group CEO of Ember Korowai Takitini, which is I think I'm very biased, a really exciting group of mental health, addiction, and intellectual disability organisations collected in a group with a passionate vision of a New Zealand that responds differently to the way that we do currently, better to those issues: mental illness, mental distress, addiction, and intellectual disability. And we do that with a range of services to support people, but also by trying to excite people into some system change, and also by removing some of the barriers that are in the way. So working on things like discrimination and system stuff, or lack of housing, or lack of money, all those sorts of things that also stop people having good mental health. But yeah, so I get to do that all the time. It's fabulous. So that's my work life. Personally, you probably tell I'm originally from England. I come from it's hard to say where I come from because I had a bit of a funny childhood. So the house I live in now is the house I've lived in the longest in my life. And I'm in my 50s, and I'm just about staying somewhere for quite a long time. So I moved around a bit as a kid, but kind of grew up in Liverpool and Lancashire, a place called Chorley in Lancashire. That's where I went to school. So I'm quite Northern English, in the sort of Coronation Street type Northern English. And more broadly Northern English when I spend time with family or friends at home. So I sound quite Kiwi now, but I've been here for, 24 years, and I've just been blessed. I've got a lovely family. I've got two beautiful children. I live on the Hibiscus Coast, north of Auckland. My wife has got a PhD and works at Massey University, and just every day I count my blessings, how lucky I am, and what a wonderful job. And I get to meet people like you, Dinny, and have lovely lunches and try and put the world to rights. So I'm very fortunate.
And I really love your enthusiasm for everything that you share. That's why I was really looking forward to have you as my guest, because I feel that your energy is way more uplifting than my one. So it's kind of both
That's
together. It's like an explosion. So it's
what you
perfect.
mean is I talk a lot, so we can fill an hour. That's what you
No,
mean.
it's really lovely that you always see the bright side of everything, even when some people might see not feel very blessed for what they have or what they have experienced. I find that quite fascinating in your way of sharing that, even if you talk about yourself as moving quite a lot, but you find it quite fascinating the fact that you are here now, and everything that happened before is still like a blessing, which it's not the same connection that many others can experience about their past. So that's
Yeah,
what I like about your enthusiasm. And
yeah.
also feeling 1 hour together.
I think we'll do that. That'll be easy. No. Look, I think I'm what some people describe as relentlessly positive, but I work in a sector where there's a lot of challenges, so I think it helps to be really positive. But mostly it comes from, and she'll never listen to this, I'm sure, so I can say this. It comes from my mum. My mum was a single mum. She raised me on for a chunk of my childhood on her own, and she taught me to give everything a bit of a go, to try really hard, and to, if she always used to say, whatever you do, try and be the best one of those. And so if you end up delivering milk or newspapers or working, emptying people's rubbish bins, then, be the best that you can be at that. So I kind of owe a lot of that positivity to my mum, who is still with us. She's only, because she had me and my brother very young. So she's very young, early 70s, but she's quite young acting. And she has a toy boy second husband who's 7 years younger than her. So she seems really young when you spend time with her. So I think I get that positivity from her. And, I grew up very, very working class with a very, I didn't expect to be a CEO, let's put it that way. I thought, I trained to be a nurse. So when I was a nurse, I was really, really happy to have a profession. And I never thought it would lead to spending my life having conversations about big systems and big change and managing people and leading organizations. So if I can't be positive, I'm not sure who can be.
Oh, thank you so much, Darryl. And actually, I think I will go from a little bit of sharing of your path to trying to understand actually how you became the CEO of Ember. What was the story behind it? If you feel like sharing it a little bit deeper, because I know that it as you said, is not a big expectation that sometimes we can have about ourselves and what life can take us to. And I'm really curious to know how this journey was for you to arrive to the point where you are and feel so blessed of your path up to this point. Thanks to your mom as well.
Yeah, she'll love that. I guess, I suppose, to tell the story, it is a weaving of my personal life and my professional life. So in England in the 90s, basically I went to university and I got a very, very good degree in psychology, but it was at a time of there was no real there was no work. It was, to be very political, it was Margaret Thatcher's Britain and there was no work for young people. So I left university with a degree in psychology thinking I was going to change the world and people were going to offer me jobs. And I ended up doing a series of jobs. I worked behind bars. I trained as a sous chef. I did a little bit of work as a I know you wouldn't believe it because I'm so gentle and soft, but as a bouncer. I basically did whatever I could just to make rent for a while. And then one day I was reading the newspaper, the Guardian newspaper. I remember it very well. And there was a full page spread of a man with another younger man, and they were in an empty football stadium, and it was an advert to be a mental health nurse. And I'd never thought of nursing in that way, that I thought of nursing as giving people injections and, doing bed baths and things like that. And this opened my eyes, and I had a few conversations with the place where I ended up training about what it was. And it really excited me, the fact I could use my psychology, but also my own lived experience. Because at that point, I kind of had flirted a little bit with mental health services myself. I'd had a couple of challenges earlier on, just coming to terms with my life. Nothing too bad, but some anxiety and depression that I dealt with. So I saw it as an opportunity to kind of pull those things together. So I trained as a mental health nurse. It went really well. I became incredibly passionate about young people. I felt it was my calling. So I was in my 20s, had a wonderful girlfriend called Polly, who I can say her name because we're friends still. However, it ended really, really badly. And so my career was taking off. I was doing a thing called early intervention and working with young people hearing voices for the first time. So I was incredibly engaged in my work. It's what I really, really wanted to do. I'd read all the books. Was like leading the establishment of an approach in the UK to do that. And then I ended up brokenhearted and in my late 20s, a bit lost and a bit down again and not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I worked with a wonderful chap called Clive, who had lived in New Zealand, and he said, just go to New Zealand for a year. That's the best place to be. Go and nurse your broken heart and meet lots of people and have lots of fun. And so I did. And here I am, quarter of a century later. I'm married with kids and I've got wonderful friends, and I've built my whole life here, which is a few things happened along the way to do that. So it was the best thing I ever did, really. I came here for a year. In the second week, I met one of my dearest friends, Shona, who introduced me to all these New Zealanders, and I quickly established this group of friends and realized quite quickly I wanted to stay here for longer. So I sorted that out and stayed for longer, and then I've just kind of bedded it down. But I had to kind of start my career again. So when I got here, it was like all the things I'd done before didn't really matter here. So I had to, and I got a job at the Cardi Centre working with young people, reconnected with that youth, mental health, early voices, that sort of stuff, and got back into that sort of field. But as I worked in the system, I became really, really aware that it was more the system that wasn't working than actually there was only so much you could do one-on-one. I was really passionately into my one-on-one work with young people, and I really loved it, and I really loved doing it, and I really loved the work I did, and I saw some lives change. But I felt like you were always fighting the fact that the way that we delivered mental health services didn't quite work. So I started to explore system change, and I ended up, first of all, setting up a school-based service called LEAP, which was really excellent, where we worked with guidance counselors and we tried to change school environments. And I've been really lucky every stage of my career to work with amazing people. With LEAP, it was a woman called Sonia Gerdiker, who was just incredible, insightful schools sort of guru. And she really helped me understand how you could change a system and impact hundreds of people rather than trying to work with each one of those people. And it really helped me. And then I had the biggest break of my life. I went to the Ministry of Health and I led the Like Minds, Like Mine program, which is New Zealand's anti-discrimination program. Because at this point, I was obsessed with changing the big things that impact people, and discrimination I saw as being the biggest barrier to, and I still believe that discrimination that people face is the biggest barrier to recovery, bigger than symptoms, bigger than medication, bigger than anything else. Is just overcoming other people's attitudes towards you is the biggest barrier. So for 6 years, I led what is probably the greatest anti-discrimination program in the world, based out of New Zealand. I traveled the world. I got to speak everywhere I went about how you address discrimination as a society. And it kind of set me up, really. And I kind of became a CEO by accident after that, to be honest, Dinny, because by that time I'd led a whole program. I was quite well known, and then people give you a chance to lead other things, and I was all right at it. And so I got another chance, and then I got the job leading an organization called Connect Supporting Recovery in 2014. Fabulous organization that really wanted to grow, and they employed me to help it grow. And the quickest way to help it grow was to join forces with another organization called Framework Trust. So we combined, did a big merger, and we created the Ember Group. And the key thing is, it was like a culmination of all the other things I'd ever done, because what Ember gave us a chance to do was to create something which would do more than just deliver services, but actually would be having conversations about system change, thinking about issues like discrimination, but also building houses and addressing determinants like poverty and housing, funding research, as well as delivering all these fantastic services. And the added bonus for me, which just fills my cup every day, is that Ember is one of the biggest employers in the country of people with lived experience. So about half of our staff have their own lived experience of using services to different degrees. I think, Tammy Allen, who works for us, who's, an amazing leader in that space. So we've got lots of mini Tamies in the organization who bring their lived experience to work and want to change the world. So I'm surrounded by people who want to change the world. So I'm happier than could be, really, because that's all I've ever wanted to do. So that's a very short version of a very long career, which hopefully isn't finished. Hopefully I've got lots more to do.
Oh, but thank you so much for sharing up to this point. We meet a couple of times before this occasion, and I didn't ever had the chance to actually go, through your journey in this way. So but now I am the person that feels blessed for this opportunity, and thank you for sharing it with me. And I guess that based on this, one of the first question that comes to my mind is actually related to the lived experience, which is something that I came across by working with Tammy a couple of years ago when my project of Art Yoga started. And for me was something really new, which I believe that many are still not quite familiar with what that it means. And how that is something that in a way or another we all have. So I wonder if you could explain with your words what it means to you lived experience in a way that those who are like completely blind and don't know yet about it might come to discover that they might be also having within themselves the lived experience that you talk about briefly.
Sure, and absolutely, you're right. I mean, everybody's living, so everybody has a lived experience. That's true. I think there are different perspectives on the phrase. So yes, we all have lived experience, and if we want to be, I think, if we want to be fulfilled, successful, loving, connected human beings, we should always reflect. I think reflection is the most important part of life. Whatever we're doing, whatever we experience, we need to reflect on that and try and grow and improve and, you know, be better partners, better parents, better friends, all of those things, or better whatever we're doing. That's a human thing, to reflect on your lived experience. In our sector, it refers specifically in the first instance to people who have a lived experience of some mental distress of their own, you know, a time when their life has kind of tipped up and their mental distress or their addiction has impacted on them. And it talks to using that lived experience of that mental distress or addiction in order to think about how we deliver services. So that's the very broad reference to it. So that would be my category. I don't consider myself using my lived experience in a work setting, but I do have some lived experience and some use of services which I reflect on and think about when I'm thinking about services. I guess the most common way it's used, and when we think about it though, is when we have a group of people that we employ and we specifically ask them. So this is not me. I don't get specifically asked, but we ask them to use their lived experience, their use of services, their experience of distress, their experience of addiction in a helpful way for other people on the same journey. So that's that where you turn your lived experience into a peer support model. And it's not an accidental intervention. It's a very intentional, specific, model-driven intervention where we're asking people to use that expertise that they have from their experience, not in a downward way, but in a sharing, mutual way with other people to support them on their journey. So kind of three references to lived experience. The general, yes, we all have lived experience, and that's a good thing. Some of us have experience of distress and maybe service use, and it's good to acknowledge that and use it. But then at the more pointy end, bringing people into an organization like Ember to use their lived experience in a therapeutic, helpful, intentional way. That's about the best I can do, I think. Tammy's much better than me at explaining.
No, I really like also the way that you differentiate the lived experience of a day-to-day life or something that we achieve along our path to what it means in a way that sometimes it might be also hard to share. And that's what I love about intentional peer support and lived experience, because it kind of bring us actually to the same level to reflect on the fact that we can also have, no matter what our label is, what our title is, we can still have had experiences that we can relate to with people that come for support and help. So I really like the way that you are actually describing it, differentiating specifically those two parts themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make the differentiation because I think I get not defensive, but quite protective of the group of people who've taken that step within our sector and have developed this thing, which I wasn't part of peer support, which is such a fabulous, and many of our services incorporate it, but such a fabulous addition in the last 10, 15, 20 years, led by some amazing leaders like Tammy, like Machdel Hammond, like Sherry Mead from the States. You know, these are Mary O'Hagan. You know, the list is you know, Graham Panther, all these people who have inspired me to understand how lived experience can be used intentionally, carefully. So I think it's important not to detract from what they've done by us, people like me saying, well, I have a lived experience, whether it be my small use of services 30 years ago or my general lived experience of life and the ups and downs of existence. I think I want to protect what they've done, and I want people to understand what they've done and what that group of people have done to drive something which is, I think, changing how we think about mental health and addiction, particularly in terms of, and it has long roots. I mean, peer support and addiction goes back probably 100 years, you know. Things like AA have always incorporated peer support. But this very specific, intentional use of lived experience, I think, is something which is transforming services. And we run services which are built completely around that. We have a wonderful service on the North Shore where people who may go to hospital, so people who are their doctors and their nurses are thinking that they're unwell and they need to go to hospital, but they don't. They come and stay with us for 2 weeks instead, completely surrounded by peer support workers. So they maintain any medication that they're on, that's managed there. But the intervention is actually a respite, peer support, intense 2 weeks intervention. And most of them don't then go in a hospital. Many of them stay with us and work for me, which is fabulous. So, but it's a way of perhaps limiting, because our system is full of wonderful people, doctors, nurses, all those people doing an amazing job. But if you get to the point where you have to go into hospital, it can actually harm you in other ways, in terms of the experience can be traumatic. So if you can avoid that, that's really, really good. And peer support is right on the edge of helping people have other options other than just the ones we've always had, which were hospitalization or hefty use of medication. So it's just great that this group of people have created something different. So I'm really proud to be, what's the modern word? An ally to support that. So yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. There are so many things that I don't know yet about Ember, and is curious that just like by sharing this small portion of conversation about your life, we come across also what Ember can do for the community of New Zealand. And I guess probably based on what you just share, I wonder, especially with your personal experience throughout all this time, if you notice a positive change that has been growing throughout the mental health, addiction, discrimination in your experience. And since you've been living here for quite a while in New Zealand, maybe you can just refer to this country, or if you wish, also go worldwide with the country that you come from or other experiences, if you have noticed that there has been a change throughout this year and how that might have impacted you as well.
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, I think I don't think change is gradual or linear. I think change comes in sort of, is it like waves, like cosines? I think in terms of specifically discrimination, I think in following the Mason inquiry in the 90s and then the setting up of Like Minds and all the work that was done with all of the celebrities and all the ordinary, everyday people that were involved, and the momentum that we gathered, I think up to sort of 2010, 2012, and with the involvement of the Mental Health Foundation and all of those organizations, Mind and Body, and all these people that were a part of that. And when it was very well funded, and the adverts were everywhere on television and all that sort of stuff, I think I know we saw from the research a real changing of attitudes towards people with mental illness specifically, because that was the target of the program. I think we've probably gone backwards a little bit since then. And I think you're always fighting the images and the representation of mental distress, addiction, and issues like that in the media, in Hollywood. Movies never present our Fiora, our clients, in a good way. They're always dangerous or hopeless, or, they do well for a while and then they succumb to their lifelong affliction. That's the way that it's always presented in television. They don't present recovery in the same way that I see it and understand it. They don't present the real human story very often or very well. So I think we've probably gone backwards a little bit. In terms of our response to it, I think it's improved. I think the innovation and the creativity and the heart and the more use of lived experience and the more people with lived experience, I think has seen our sector get better. And I do think we've moved forward. Have we moved forward far enough? No, nowhere near. Nowhere near. It still needs to change. We've got a system, I think, that still is built. This is a podcast. People can't see me. I'm doing things with my hands. It's built to replicate the institution when we had bricks and mortars institutions. So if you imagine a hospital building, the old mental hospitals, they worked in a very similar way to the system still does. So if I was not well, I would turn up at the hospital. I would be ushered into a room. I would see a doctor who would decide whether or not I was sick enough to come in. And then once I was in, there would be nurses, social workers, art therapists, whatever. All the interventions were inside the building. We got rid of the buildings because they were largely abhorrent, disgusting places where people were harmed. However, we replaced it with a system in society that's still largely similar. So you turn up and see a psychiatrist or a GP. They decide. This is the mental health system, not the addiction system, because addiction is slightly different. We are able to say in addiction, I have an addiction, and own it ourselves. But people turn up to a mental health assessment and somebody, usually a doctor, tells them whether they're sick enough. If they're not deemed sick enough, they're sent away. Come back when you're sicker. And we see that challenge, particularly with young people, where you've kind of got one go to offer them something. And if you send them away, they don't come back. And once you're deemed sick enough, then you come into the system, no bricks and mortar anymore, just a virtual system. And then all the things that we offer, like peer support, community support, employment support, nurses, social workers, all those things are then offered to you after and we need to open that up. We need people to have more people to see at the start of their journey so they can decide themselves what they want. And we need more of those things that are in the system to be available without being in the system. So peer support should be available in schools, should be available in GP land, should be available on MRI, should just be available digitally. All of these things, we need to throw them into the community, because in New Zealand, every year, there are about 1.2 million people who reach a level of mental distress or addiction who need support from somebody. If we maximize and activate and build a fully functional system, as we think of it now, we'll service, including primary care, about 400,000 of those. So that means there are 800,000 people every year who maybe 20, 30 years ago would have been seen as part of the system, their level of distress or addiction, who sit on a waiting list or just get sent away, get routed to a website, don't get. And they're the ones that phone 1737 looking for service or reach out to something in their community like a workplace program or a MRI. And so we've got to work across the whole of society, not just rely on this rather flawed, tax-funded, always going to be limited system that reflects the old institution. And we've got to drive that mental health, mental distress, mental health support, addiction support message to the whole of society and open up that very narrow gap and that very narrow entry into a system, because that system doesn't work for really anybody, because we haven't got enough doctors and nurses. We haven't got enough people in the system to operate at it. We don't have accurate ways of deciding who should be in it, who shouldn't be in it. We send people away. They bounce back and forward. We see the damage that does all the time. And it's not like we don't know this, but we always see the answer as more funding into the system. I don't think any government's ever going to fund that system to support 1.2 million people. So we need to find other answers and open it up and make it society's issue, make mental health everybody's business, not just the business of doctors and nurses. So that's a very long rant about system change, because I'm really passionate that we change the whole system, not just hospitals and doctors.
No, it's really fascinating. It's something really interesting that I never get the chance to look, and maybe because I didn't have spent so much time in this country yet, and so I'm finding quite new myself to all this world that have been so fascinating and so passionate through my project of art yoga. And maybe related to what your share was, is that you have found that, I don't truly know how to phrase this question, but do you find that there is still a lot of shame towards ourselves and our own mental distress that doesn't sup- kind of become blind and don't see that there is already some support out there, or we are finding still that we are struggling to seek out for that support that is out there? It's a question that is not exactly a question, it's more like a, a statement.
That's a great question. I think when I was working with the consumer movement in discrimination, what they described that as is, which is a concept I really like, and it was there was a piece of research by a wonderful researcher called Deb Peterson, who wrote a piece of research called "Walk a Mile in My Shoes," which was about the phrase they use is self-stigma. So, if you think about the concept of discrimination, and from the day we're born, we see in everything on television and our families around us, the words we hear, we see all of this discriminatory language and action towards people with mental illness or addiction. So you hear the words, you know, nutter, psycho, all those sorts of things. You see people being discriminated against, not getting jobs or relationships and those sorts of things. And then what happens is you toddle through life, and then you have an issue yourself, and all of that discrimination that you've seen, you turn that in on yourself. So you've developed this, or this is the theory, you've developed this idea that because it's everything you've ever been told on the media, in stories, in all the things around you, is that people with mental illness or addiction are failed, hopeless, perhaps dangerous, all of those things you've been told. And then you start to realize that maybe you've got something happening, or a doctor gives you a diagnosis, and then all of that turns in on you. So all of those things you've thought about other people, you then think about, oh, that's me then. I'm hopeless. I'm useless. I'm not going to get a job or a relationship. Maybe I'm dangerous. And that is this idea of self-stigmatizing, you know, bringing all that on yourself. And of course, that is rooted in shame and bad feelings about yourself. But yeah, I think if we frame it as a type of discrimination, moving that the solution to it is to solve the discrimination in society. If we saw more positivity, if we saw more recovery, if we saw more positive role models, as we have seen some, if we just flooded the world with these amazing creative people that I know who have had experience of mental illness and then done amazing things, then maybe when you get the diagnosis, you might think, hey, you know, it's all right, because I've seen Tammy, and Tammy had that diagnosis, and maybe I can be like Tammy. Look at, Mike King had his issues and he's done this, or, maybe I can be like them. And that's the way to try and address it, because it's very hard to address the stuff inside. That's a different thing. If we can address it societally, I think we can. But that's a long-term dream and vision of mine. I'd like people to understand what I understand through my experience of knowing so many people who've recovered from mental distress or addiction, who are the most amazing people in my life, who inspire me, who thrill me, who love me, some of them, the unlucky ones, who give so much to the world. I'd like young people to see that, the artists, the musicians, the brilliant thinkers who've had experience of, because that's the truth. The truth is, if you got rid of mental illness, mental distress and addiction tomorrow, we'd probably have no art, no music, no literature, no great thinkers, because most of them have flirted with madness, depression, anxiety at some point in their life, because they have, or addiction, or all of the above. So I want people to understand the people I know and love, the people who mental distress is part of their journey, but just a part, and they give so much more, and they've used it in such a different way. So yeah, again, I dream of big dreams, Dinny, big dreams.
Well, all the dreams start with baby steps, so it's good that we have them. We don't know if we will actually arrive to the actual point that we wish, but we can still chase them and do our part, which I believe that we both are doing in our own little world. But
What's it like in Italy, Dinny? I know I'm not supposed to ask an interviewer questions
no, of
because
course you can. Yeah, you're
well,
allowed to ask questions.
we see the Italian system as having some amazing positives, you know, where the institutions were closed and there was a drive to just do everything in the community and have a more sort of drop-in sort of way of doing things. Was that your experience growing up?
I have to admit that probably when I left, I was still quite young and not really aware of everything, and I have quite of a judgmental way of seeing Italians. I believe that Italy is really beautiful, but I'm not too sure about Italians themselves. One of the reasons why I say this is because I find a country that is quite beautiful and well known throughout the rest of the world, and what is probably to me makes a difference in the way that they see themselves and the way that others see themselves is the fact that they are stuck in a world that at the moment speaks a language that no other country speaks, and every time that they perceive themselves by the beautiful country with beautiful buildings and beautiful food, it kind of block them to grow and to reach their full potential in how they can actually improve themselves. So I'm just basing this through the connection that I have to my family and friends, which I still feel that is quite limited in the way that they are perceiving. There is still a lot of stigma, there is still a lot of judgment and shame,
Yeah.
which I've been anyway far away for 5 years right now. So I don't know how it grew. Maybe improved more than I could remember, but the picture that I have is still that is quite ignorant in certain aspect and certain ways. As well, when I explain, for instance, what I do is still, I still find people that don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I also had experience in the Department of Correction or with people in the spectrum or with mental health. And I'm still finding hard to explain to people that are part of my life back to Italy why it's important to do what I'm doing and
Yeah.
why I'm willing to support. So I know that we had this beautiful history related with we call it the madhouses in Italian, that has been closed and they have inspired other countries to do the same. But
That's
still,
right.
it's quite of a small portion of what the actual country capability is to understand and be compassionate or empathizing towards these experiences that many have experienced. I don't know if this makes sense, but
Oh no, it makes absolute sense, and it's always interesting, isn't it? Because the way that a country's perceived and the way you experience it when you live in it. I mean, I think that's been very sharp here. When I talk to people, my family and friends in the UK, and we talk about Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister, you know, they have this idea that she's a saint, you know, that, but the perception of her here was, you know, it became quite towards the end, sadly, it became quite different. And it's always interesting, isn't it, the way that we perceive, because I traveled around Italy with the girlfriend that broke my heart, traveled around Italy in the 1996. I'd spent, I can't remember, a while there, traveled around. And as a tourist, I just saw this beautiful place, but it seemed very flawed in terms of a bit like New Zealand, the inequities between rich and poor. Many places you travel to, I found the same in Mexico when I was there. Just this wonderful, beautiful place. But in Italy, there seemed to be a big gap between wealthy and poor. And you could see that as you traveled around. And obviously we have issues with that here in New Zealand as well. It kind of besmirches the beauty of the country when you see such inequities. And I know that Italy's had that issue for a long time, hasn't it? The gap between rich and poor.
yes, I believe that that is still out there. And um, more than that, to me, is also the boundaries of a language that you are the only one in the world of speaking. So even the information that you're receiving are filtered. And if you don't have the curiosity of learning even just simply English, you kind of are stuck in some of the information that you can receive yourself, especially if you are part of the poor category of people, then you're not truly willing to invest your time in study a language that will not give you a future from their point of view, you know. So it's quite limiting the way that they can see the world. They just can see what is in front of them, which is Italians, and we are quite a bit in that country. So it kind of
Yeah. I never thought about that,
initiate a
Jenny.
lot of anger, because people are just like building up their anger and projecting it outside instead of finding other ways of addressing it. So I'm myself still like having issue to accept the beauty and the less beauty of my own country in this way, and know that we still have potential to grow, but at the same time I find that we are one step behind other countries maybe for those limitations.
I'd never thought about the language thing, but of course you make a really good point, because if you speak Spanish or Italian, or Spanish or English or even German, then there are other countries in the world that speak those languages. But of course, Italy, there isn't. It's also what you're describing is, I was smiling because as a fellow emigrant, somebody who's moved to another country to live, and you've been here 5 years, I think there's a journey that we go on. Certainly was for me. I can only own my own experience. When I first came here, I felt very English. I felt like I was a tourist, Northern English proud. I would tell everybody, that would be the first thing you knew about me, was I was Northern English and I was here in New Zealand and I was having a jolly good time, enjoying myself being Northern English. But after a while, you have to readdress your feelings about your home country, because you've chosen to not be there. And I think for me, it was about 4 years. After I've been here about 4 years, I was a permanent resident. And I had to be honest with myself about my journey and choosing and reflect differently, because I'd chosen not to be in England. So if everything about me was about being Northern English, well, why wasn't I still living there? And I had to think about why I love being here so much and what that meant about me as a person. And I've always liked traveling. I've always traveled around. And my wife, Lindsay, is the same. She's we're kindred spirits, that we like to travel, or we've always liked to travel. Before the climate crisis makes you feel guilty about it. We've always enjoyed that. But yeah, I think it's an immigrant's journey. I think I was going to say you're just like me, Denny, but you're nothing like me, because you're about half my size and you're young and Italian. But just in terms of there reaches a point where you have to reflect on your nationality, because I think we're kind of tricked that nationalism is more important than, you could have been born anywhere. I think this is where I really connect with Te Ao Māori and thinking about who you are as a whakapapa, connected to the people before you, but also as that idea of tūranga waiwai, where you feel your feet are planted. I think in those terms now, and I realize that while I whakapapa back to Northern England and I feel this sense of connection to it, I actually feel better about myself rooted here. I stand on the beach in Orewa and I feel connected to this whenua, this land. I feel connected to here because this has been the best part of my life. This is where I've been really happy, content, fulfilled. I've done the things that are really important to me. I've been a parent. I've been a partner and a husband, and those things are more of the things that I'm proud of inside me. So I feel that connection here. And after a quarter of a century, half my life I've lived here now, just about. And yeah, I think those concepts are more important, because my mum could have given birth to me in any country. That's just accidental, isn't it? So my choice to live here is more important than accidentally being born in a hospital in Northern England. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually resonate with everything you say. It's true. We are we are the same.
We're the same.
The thing that I found different in my case was that I realized through my journey, through my being immigrant in other country, I've been living in Australia before New Zealand, of the reaction that I always receive when I say that I'm Italian is always a very positive one. And sometimes I'm actually surprised, because I'm wonder, what if I would have mentioned another country, then I might have experienced some discrimination instead of just the beauty for the country where I come from. And so I guess that I build up some of my own resistance through the exhibition of joy when I say that I'm Italian, which I'm still 100% loving pizza, loving pasta, and if I could eat that all day, every day, I will just go for it. But as you, I choose not to live in Italy anymore, and choose to live here because it also make me more content in the way that I'm growing, in the way that I'm relating to other culture and growing also by other insight and other wisdom. So I'm quite fortunate as well to stand where I'm standing today. Looking back, I should be more, proud of my ancestries, but at the same time, finding a little bit challenging and struggle to know that we could do way more better as Italian than we actually are.
But that doesn't, and forgive me, but that doesn't sound like what you said. You sound very proud to be connected to your ancestors. You've just got it sounds like more of just a slight discomfort with the idea of Italian nationalism, Italianism. And I do the same. So I'm really, really, really proud of where I come from. I'm proud of like Northern English roots. It's really important to me. However, I'm not very proud of English nationalism. I feel shame at colonialism. I cringe when Cambridge University says they want to keep the spears from the Aboriginal people that was in the news this week. Those sorts of things. I'm not a royalist. I'm not patriotic in that way. You can do both. You can be really proud, I think, and when I think about that, and that's why I say Te Ao Māori's really helped me on my journey to understand that, because if I say that to our kaumātua, who's a wonderful, wonderful man, he understands that. He's saying that you're proud of your people, you're proud of your mum and your granddad. I owe a huge debt to my granddad, who was a miner, who crawled on his stomach down coal mines for 40 years so that I could go to university and have this life and do the things that I've done. That I'm not proud of him because he's English. I don't feel some sense of, right on, governor, God and king and country. I feel proud to be connected to that human being who did that. And I think Māori really kind of get that. It's that whakapapa to people, and the things that they did connects you to the whenua, to the land, not this sort of irrational. And we both, Italy and England, are the same, aren't they? You grow up and you go to school and you get pumped full of this sense of, Italy's the best country in the world. We are, all that sort of, I just saluted for people who can't see, all that nonsense about, Britons will never be slaves. That's what I grew up with, rule Britannia, all that, Britons will never be, it's nonsense. All that's the bit I reject. That's the bit I say, naff off. I'm not going to do that. But am I proud of my working class Northern English roots and my mum and my granddad and my great granddad and all those? Absolutely, I'm proud of that. But that's not Englishness to me. That's them. So and I think that's all right. I don't think we should be mean to ourselves. I think we're just advanced human beings, Dinny, that are working this stuff out and not falling for the nationalistic trick. So good on you, and you're on your journey. And the other thing I was going to say, I think that 4 or 5 years is a really special time. And it's no coincidence to me at this stage in your journey, lots of people go back, because I think that reflection for some people is, oh, actually, no, that's more important to me than continuing this journey. I need to be back in my tribe, in my country. And a lot of people, after it is about 3-4 years, a lot of people return, a lot of immigrants return back to their country. And I think this couple of years, certainly for me, that 4 or 5 years was a time when I had to make a decision. I did also meet my wife, and we got pregnant, which helped with the decision making. Although she's from England as well, even though I met her here, she's English. I came here and said I would never go out with another English girl, and then I married a girl from Wolverhampton. So go figure. But yeah, no. So I do think that reflective process after you've been here a few years is really, really important, and you should talk about it. You should have a podcast, and that's what you should do.
Thank you. I always mute myself so people don't actually, in this case, hear me laugh at all time, because that's what I'm doing while I'm muting myself and nobody can hear me. I'm just like giggling out of your sharing. And yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, you were worried that there were no space for question to me, but actually I love that, because initiate different conversation that might not be exactly the one that we begin with, but they can still spark something. And in this case, I receive a lot of support, so I'm feeling a little bit less ashamed today of where I come from,
I also
the country of the dough.
I'm also mindful that if somebody listening to this met both of us in a cafe, you're far more interesting to talk about than I am. So, white English blokes with beards are 10 a penny, but Italian young people who've set up their own business are far more interesting. So that's why I thought I'd ask you a question.
Oh, thank you so much for that, and for your amazing support. How do I say this? What I'm doing right now
You're
with
flexing your biceps to the
yes, that's what I'm doing right now to feel really proud of myself.
Good on you.
Um,
So you should be.
we are almost hitting 1 hour, and I didn't ask you earlier how long you had, because if it was for me, I was going on for other 5 hours together with having random conversation. But at this stage, be mindful of your time. I just want to ask you, not the final question yet, that's still a surprise,
The
but if
scary
there
final
is,
question.
yeah, the scary final question, that could be for some people sometime. But if there is anything else that you wish to share that we might not have talked about yet, and you feel that is quite relevant and important, and you wish to use this platform to share it, you can also say no. You don't feel any pressure.
Oh, it's a good question. That's not the scary question, because that's a scary question too. I guess the only thing we haven't really talked about in terms of my journey is being a parent, and just how I'm very connected to my journey as a parent at the moment, because my son left home 2 weeks ago to go to university in Wellington, and it's an amazing reflective process, because you spend so much. I've got a daughter who's still at home, but you spend so much of parenting not thinking about it, just doing it. So it's not a reflective process. It's just seats of your pants, just doing stuff. You're taking them to school. You're just doing all the things you have to do. But the last couple of weeks, I've had to reflect on whether or not we've done a good job, because he's gone into the world, and you get these phone calls where he can't operate a dryer, or he's lost his wallet and he doesn't know how to cancel his bank card, or something like that. And there's a tendency, you can be quite harsh on yourself as a parent and think, oh my God, how have I raised a son who can't operate a dryer? But then I have to reflect and think about all the things he can do. The fact that he's made friends, the fact that he's gone in the first place, all of that, and he's doing this part of his journey alone, and he's not just staying at home like lots of kids do. So yeah, I think I was feeling a sense of pride in me and my wife for what we've achieved to manage to get one to 18. And he's I think the best thing I could say is that if you met him, you'd like him. He's a nice young man, So I feel incredibly proud of that, because parenting for me, of all the things that I've done, my own journey, my own stuff, all the bits, ups and downs, my career, parenting's been the hardest. Parenting is raw and challenging, and it's like having a part of you. It's hard to explain, and all the parents listening will be going, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. It's the moment your child is born, you're the second most important person in your life, and that's phenomenally rewarding and wonderful, but also really, really scary and difficult. And there hasn't really been a minute since he left home that I haven't thought, was he all right? But of course, he's not going to listen to this, so it's all right. I wouldn't tell him, or I wouldn't ring him, but you spend it's just and I keep wanting to ring my mum up and apologize for all the stupid all the challenges and the heartache I gave her, and when I left home, and when I got in trouble with the police, and all those things that I did to her, because I was 10 times worse. My son's a dream compared to what I was. So yeah, it's a remarkable journey, and I highly recommend it. But but also find people going through it and do it together, because it's one that you don't want to do on your own. So yeah, that was on my mind, so I thought I'd share that as well.
And that's a beautiful reflection. That's what exactly you already shared in some extent, but that was the curiosity. How is it for you now to be a parent with a son that doesn't live anymore in the same zip code as you? Because this is our experience. So
Yeah.
now you're passing it to a new
Of course,
generation.
of course, yeah. So when I left and came to New Zealand, my mum was always supportive. I know now because she's told me that it broke her for me to be on the other side of the world. I'd traveled before, but this was kind of semi-permanent. That I know how hard that was for her. But and the same way my son wouldn't know what I'm telling you, that the way that we feel, my mum would never have told me that. She only ever supported me, only ever made me feel like it was an adventure and just go and do it. I know now what she went through, but that's because of my own reflection, but also because I've asked her and she's told me. So it's an interesting thing because I have to think about, because my son, he's got aspirations to go and live in the UK for a while, connecting to his whakapapa, wanting to go and experience that because he considers himself at least half English. So he wants to go and do that. And now I'm starting to think, that's going to be a bit harder than I thought, isn't it? Because I'm going to encourage him. I'm going to support him to do that. And then I'm going to spend every day worrying about him. So that's all right. That's the thing. When you have children, you have to put up with the fact that your life is the most important thing and your life is over. And the old adage that you're only as happy as your most unhappy child is true. And I live that every day. If one of my children are hurting or upset, then I feel that pain. I mean, I probably towards the end of this conversation, probably not the right time to share, but we also had a third child who passed away and in childbirth. And so I'm very aware of the precarious nature of parenting and the precarious nature of relationships, how quickly things can be bad, sad, and be taken away from you. Not that I spend my life thinking my children are going to pass away, but just that sense of vulnerability. I kind of live that. I think all parents do, but having had the worst thing happen, I'm struggling for English. I should ask an Italian. It turns the volume up. It elevates the sensitivity towards things perhaps going wrong if you're not careful. So I have to, and me and my wife, we have to counsel ourselves to support ourselves to rationalize and realize that things are going to be all right. He's going to have ups and downs, but he's a good kid and he'll be all right. So parenting's hard is the short part of that conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for going into deeply sharing about your personal experience of being a parent and also losing and grieving a loss for a certain extent, and how that reflects back to the, in Italy will be precario, but I don't know in English, like the
precarious. Precarious.
Oh well,
precario.
easy.
Precario is
I should
better.
have just
No.
trying to put an English accent to an Italian world, of life. Yeah, the fact that life is so delicate, and while you're responsible or feeling responsible for another person's life, it kind of make it even harder as a job, as a sort of connection with the fact that we are all powerless anyway, of the fact that no matter how much love and care we wish for people that we love, is still irrelevant if they're on the other side of the world or next to us, and how we can live with that vulnerability and accepting that part of ourselves as well. So thank you for your sharing.
I think it's really, sorry, just to comment on that, it's really important that, Dinny, that
Sure.
I think vulnerability, precario, is very important because I have a real belief that if we're not vulnerable, you can't experience great joy. So if we don't love and give ourselves, how can we experience being loved back? So, for me, despite the fact that, some bad things have happened to me in my life, I always try and give everything of me and take risks and, risk heartbreak and risk disappointment, because if you don't do that, you don't get great joy. You don't get the sporting analogy of supporting a football team or something. If you're not there for the bad times, you don't get the good times. So you've got to give yourself and be vulnerable, because I think vulnerable people love better. I think there's nothing more important in life than love and loving people, loving friends, loving family, loving people around you is the most important thing, I think. And that's the greatest joy in life when you spend time with people you love and who love you, and there's nothing better than that. And you have to do that with vulnerability because you're opening up yourself, aren't you? So I think, yeah, I'm very mindful of that, because it's very easy, I think, when things go wrong, to close up and to cut yourself off and not be emotional and not take risks and not put yourself out there and worry about being heartbroken or worry about, you know, being hurt. And in that, on that path is not joy. It's the opposite of joy. So yeah, so I think precario is the important thing.
I really love the how Italian word sounds with different accent. So
Hey, it's
they
Northern
always
English
make me.
precario. It sounds like Coronation Street. So.
And I guess that we are ready for the final question if you're ready too.
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
Okay. Okay. So to me, it can be quite easy, but I understand that for certain extent is not that easy for some people, and it's coming from the connection that we have with the practice of art yoga, which always finish with three things. In the case of the practice, finish with three things that you're grateful for, but to twist it in a way that is useful also for people who are listening. My final question for you, if you could share with us three empowering messages that you wish to dedicate to our audience, to yourself, to me, and even maybe
Okay.
to your son who just left. You can use him as a way of sharing if you find it difficult to find three empowering messages. And no matter how small or big they are, to me, they are all valuable.
No, I don't find it difficult. I was trying to think of the ones that are immediate to mind. I think, okay, well, so the one I say to my children every day, which I think is empowering. I hope is empowering, and they don't listen most days, but I'm hoping, you know, when I pass away, that they remember that I said it every day, and that's to work hard and have fun. So every day when my daughter leaves to school, I tell her to work hard and have fun, because I think that's a really important message, is to go out into the world and give everything you've got, but also to try and enjoy yourself as you do it, because what's the point? What's the point of working hard? And I think there's a yin and yang to it for me. There's a balance between, you know, sweat and joy and work and pleasure. And I try to tell my children or support my children to experience both on a daily basis, because I think they're really important. The second one would probably be comes from a book called The Water Babies, which is a book I read when I was a kid. And there's a teacher in that, and her name was, and she was a very empowering teacher, and her name was Mrs. Do As You Would Be Done By. So I always live my life for it. I think it's really important to treat other people how you'd want to be treated yourself. So, you know, if you're treating other people poorly, then you can't complain if other people treat you poorly. So that would be my second one. And then the final one, and again, it's one I say a lot, is we're only here once. You know, YOLO, as the kids say. You've got to make the most of it, because you're a long time dead. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in reincarnation. I'm here once, and it's a great gift to be old. It's a great gift to be in my 50s. You know, I've got friends that didn't make their 50s. So I don't want to ever spend my life worrying about my aches, my pains. I had surgery last year. It's just a thing. I'm grateful to be here. And you only live once. You really do, Denny. I wish I could have another go, but you know, I've probably got 30 years left, and I'm going to make every single summer a great one. Because why would you do anything else with this fabulous gift we've been given? You know, to be alive. You know, I think it's really important. So yeah, YOLO, Denny.
To feel young again. But thank you so much, Daryl. This is my favorite moment, although for some people it might be quite challenging, might be the part that they wish to avoid, but it's the one that I embrace the messages starting from myself. And I'm really glad that I was here to observe YOLO, first of all, and all the other messages that you share. And I hope that they will be quite inspiring also for our listeners in this moment.
Well, I hope so. Hope so.
So thank you so much, Daryl, for your time. I will put in the description of this event all the link related of this episode. Sorry, all the link related with Ember. So if people wish to be more connected and understand better how they can be supported through the organization that you are CEO of.
Yeah, and also Ember Innovations. I think it's really, I think for your listeners as well, checking out Ember Innovations, because that our Ember services and our Ember organization, maybe people might want to work there or connect with. But Ember Innovations, we're really encouraging people to come and join in and be part of. So,
oh, thank you for sharing that. That's also I'm doing a note in my mind to add that one too, so that people will know that it is not two different. It is sort of two different programs, but it's still part of the same tree.
it's all part of the same vision, the same mission, but it's just some different ways of doing it. That's all. It's pretty straightforward. We're just doing things. We're trying a few different approaches to achieve the same thing.
Perfect. I will add this one as well. Meanwhile, I really, really want to thank you for your time and your sharing. Really valuable. And I wish we had other, 5 hours to
It might get a bit
conversate.
boring.
Who
No, thank
knows?
you, Denny. I really, really enjoyed it. And the bicep flex was a real treat. Well done. Good work on the biceps.
Thank you so much. I'll do it again. Just for you because nobody else can
Nobody
see
else
that.
can see it. No.
But thank you everybody for listening and have a good day.
Grazie per averci fatto compagnia. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. If you wish to stay updated and connected, visit us on our social media channels and our website www.artyoga.co. Ci sentiamo presto. Ciao! See you!